Welcome to Terror Tales.
The heavy thrum of the plane's engines vibrated through the soles of Emily's feet as she stood in the boarding line, clutching her worn leather bag. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and nervous anticipation, the kind that always filled the air before a long-haul flight. Her editor's voice echoed in her mind, still incredulous that she had agreed to cover a ridiculous story about a haunted flight. Emily wasn't the type to scare easily. After all, she was a journalist who thrived on exposing the truth, not indulging in urban legends. But there was something about this assignment that made her skin crawl. She glanced down at her boarding pass. Seat 13B. Unlucky for some, she thought with a smirk. Emily didn't believe in such superstitions. But as the line crept forward and she caught sight of the plane's tail number, 666, the smirk faded from her lips. The number stared back at her like an ominous warning. Shaking off the unease that prickled at her neck, she forced herself to focus. It was just another flight, another story to debunk. The cabin was oddly quiet when she stepped on board, the kind of silence that felt unnatural in a place usually buzzing with passengers, stowing luggage, and chatting away. Emily couldn't help but notice how empty the plane seemed. As she made her way down the narrow aisle, she counted barely a dozen passengers. It wasn't until she reached her row that she saw the empty seats around her. 13A and 13C were unoccupied, though a faint chill clung to the air around them. Emily slid into her seat, shivering despite the warmth of the plane. Her fingers brushed against something cold, and she looked down to see the window frosted over, tiny cracks forming in the pattern of spider webs. She rubbed at the glass, but the frost clung stubbornly, obscuring the view outside. The night sky beyond was a thick, impenetrable darkness. "Excuse me, miss," a voice interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see a flight attendant standing by her seat, his face pale and drawn. His eyes, though kind, held an edge of exhaustion that seemed out of place for the start of a journey. "You're seated in 13B, correct?" Emily nodded, a bit puzzled. "I need to ask you to move to another seat." His tone was firm, though an unspoken urgency lurked beneath it. "Why?" Emily asked, frowning. "The plane's practically empty." The attendant hesitated, glancing over his shoulder, as if afraid of being overheard. "It's just a precaution. Please follow me." She felt a ripple of unease. "Is there something wrong with this seat?" "Just follow me," he repeated, his eyes narrowing as though silently pleading with her. Reluctantly, Emily unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. As she followed the attendant toward the front of the plane, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. And that's when she noticed it, the door labeled "Crew Only." But it wasn't the door itself that caught her attention. It was the small, almost imperceptible sign just above it, barely lit by the dim overhead lights. Cabin 666. Emily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The flight attendant noticed her hesitation and quickly stepped in front of the door, blocking her view. "This way, miss," he urged, his voice tense. But Emily couldn't move. She could feel the pull of that door, the cold emanating from behind it, like fingers curling around her spine. There was something behind that door, something that didn't belong in this world. "What's in there?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. The attendant's face twisted in a grimace. "It's best you don't ask." This introduction sets the tone for the rest of the story. You can build upon it by slowly unraveling the mystery behind cabin 666, gradually increasing the tension and delivering terrifying moments that will keep readers on the edge of their seats. Jacob sank into his seat, feeling the familiar hum of the airplane's engines vibrating through his bones. Another flight, another city, another late-night journey back home. He'd lost count of how many times he'd boarded these flights, exhausted and drained, just wanting to sleep through the few hours it took to get from one coast to the other. His fingers brushed over the worn leather briefcase by his feet, a constant companion in his hectic life. The plane shuddered slightly as it taxied down the runway, a reminder that a storm was brewing outside. Jacob glanced out the window, the thick, dark clouds gathering ominously in the distance. He wasn't afraid of flying, but he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that crept up his spine. It wasn't the storm that bothered him. It was something else, something intangible that seemed to hang in the air like a heavy fog. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're expecting some turbulence on our climb to cruising altitude, so please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, calm and steady, but it did little to ease the knot forming in Jacob's stomach. He closed his eyes, trying to will himself to relax. Just a few hours, and he'd be home. But the nagging sense of dread refused to leave him. The plane took off, engines roaring as it climbed higher and higher into the night sky. The cabin lights dimmed, leaving the passengers bathed in a soft amber glow. Jacob settled back into his seat, trying to find comfort in the hum of the engines. Around him, the other passengers were already drifting off to sleep, their heads lolling against the seat backs, their breathing slow and steady. But not everyone. Jacob opened his eyes again, frowning as he noticed a figure 2 rows ahead of him. A man, sitting unnervingly still, his gaze fixed straight ahead. Something about the way he sat, unmoving, made Jacob's skin crawl. The man's face was pale, too pale, like the color had been drained from it. His hands, resting on the armrests, were rigid, the knuckles white as bone. For a moment, Jacob thought the man was asleep, but then he saw it. The man's eyes were wide open, staring blankly ahead, unblinking. A chill ran down Jacob's spine. He leaned forward slightly, trying to get a better look, but the man didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even breathe. The plane jolted suddenly, turbulence shaking the cabin. Jacob snapped back in his seat, gripping the armrests as the lights flickered. For a moment, the man disappeared in the brief blackout, and when the lights returned, someone else was sitting in his place. A woman, casually flipping through a magazine, completely oblivious to the fact that moments ago, a man had been sitting there, staring into nothingness. Jacob's heart pounded in his chest. He looked around, searching for the flight attendant, but they were nowhere to be seen. The other passengers continued to sleep, undisturbed by the turbulence or the strange occurrence Jacob had just witnessed. Had he imagined it? Was he just overtired, seeing things that weren't there? He rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the unease that clung to him like a second skin. Must be the stress, he muttered to himself, though the words felt hollow. But deep down, he knew something was wrong, terribly wrong. The plane jolted again, harder this time, and Jacob felt the air pressure shift around him, like the cabin was compressing. The overhead bins rattled, and the lights flickered once more. A low, almost imperceptible whisper seemed to weave through the hum of the engines, just beyond the edge of hearing. Jacob strained to listen, but the whispers eluded him, slipping away like smoke. He looked out the window again, but all he saw was darkness. The storm clouds had swallowed the sky, and the plane was now hurtling through an endless void. There was no moon, no stars, just an all-consuming blackness pressing in on every side. He couldn't escape the feeling that they were no longer alone up here. that something was watching them from the shadows, something that didn't belong in the world of the living. The whispers grew louder, though still just out of reach, like voices calling from the other side of a wall. Jacob pressed his hands over his ears, trying to block them out, but they seemed to seep into his mind, bypassing his senses altogether. And then he saw it, a shadow moving down the aisle. It was too dark to make out clearly, just a vague, indistinct shape that flickered at the edge of his vision. He turned to look, but it vanished before his eyes, leaving only the faintest trace of a presence behind. Panic tightened his chest. He wanted to call for help, to alert someone, anyone, but the words caught in his throat. Around him, the passengers remained oblivious, as if they were locked in some deep, unnatural slumber. Jacob's hands shook as he fumbled for the call button, but before he could press it, the plane lurched violently, sending him crashing back into his seat. The lights blinked out, plunging the cabin into total darkness. For a few agonizing seconds, there was nothing but the deafening roar of the engines and the rapid thud of his own heartbeat. And then, the screaming began. This is the beginning of your horror story. No escape at 30,000 feet. The story builds on Jacob's increasing paranoia, the eerie atmosphere inside the plane, and the terrifying supernatural force at play. You can continue the story by expanding on the mysterious events, escalating the horror, and eventually revealing the dark secrets that bind the plane and its passengers in an unending nightmare.